Welcome to the STR Data Lab.
Hello and welcome to the STR Data Lab. I'm Jamie Lane, Chief Economist at AirDNA, and I'm joined today by my good friend and co-host, Scott Sage. Scott, good to see you.
Great to see you, Jamie. We're also joined by a third co-host. For those of you watching on YouTube or online, Jamie, who's this co-host behind you? Is that Sunny?
Yeah, this is my dog, Sunny. She's joined us for today. She's enjoying the sunlight.
We'll get her take on what she's seen in year-over-year RevPAR trends.
She's her biggest indicator is her number of walks that she gets per day. She's feeling really good if she gets 3. She's pretty pissed if she only gets 1.
She exclusively books pet-friendly short-term rentals.
Oh yeah.
All right, that's my last bit of our opening banter. We have the U.S. review for January to take care of today, Jamie. I'm gonna maybe start broad instead of going to specific data points for you. What we're emerging from month 1 of 2026. What's on your mind for the industry?
Yeah. I'm going to answer your question. But before I answer your question, I just want to give a shout out. We don't usually talk about AirDNA much. We talk about the data, but we don't really talk about the product much. But we had a new release come out today. Today is February 18th. This will be released on, I think, the 19th and heat maps yield. Like, the UI changes that happened on AirDNA today, I've been so excited about and sort of seeing them come to fruition over the past couple months. And I feel like it's already changed the way I've used their DNA platform and finally being able to really visualize the data. So we won't go into it, but I just highly suggest for listeners, take a look and see some of those new updates.
Well, give me an example. Why is it important? What's the use case there? Because you're right, this is a big change to the platform and worth discussing.
So I'll give my 3 ways I've been using it right now. One is I'm looking for another investment. So I'm trying to find where are good properties potentially buy. So we have this new heat map on yield. So it brings in every property that's for sale. It then colors the dot on the map for each of those for sale homes based on the ratio of what that home would earn as a short-term rental. So we run a rentalizer estimate on every single property and then divide that by the total home price. And so I can go in and filter my buy box. Like, all right, I'm looking for properties $500,000 to $1 million, entire homes and houses, not condos, anything like that. Even and filter by amenities things. And then see all those properties on the map, go through, click through each one, evaluate them. Like, it makes sorting through all the for sale homes magic that I just find incredibly helpful.
I mean, that's the use case that you and I get asked the most, right? Which is like, hey, I have X amount of dollars. Where do I go look for an investment? How do I find where to invest and what the best property would be?
Yep. And then the other one, or other 2 I like, is we have these new occupancy heat maps. So before in the AirDNA platform, we did these heat maps, but they're all based on market score. And I know what market score goes into it, but I I doubt many other people would know what goes into the market score. But now I can sort of choose my metric that I want to look at and then start high level at markets. But then when I go into a market, shade all the different sub markets, or even do it at a property level. And so I can start to see where is there sort of outsize occupancy opportunity. So where are the pockets of high occupancy? I can then filter those heat maps, like 2, 3, 4, 5 bedroom properties, and just see where the outperformers are. Because where there's high levels of occupancy, where there's excess demand, those are areas that I'm most interested in investing in. So combining that heat map then with the yield one, we're starting to get some real insight on where to make my next investment. And then the third one, and this I really had to push the team to do because it was sort of new data that we were visualizing and bringing in, is we've taken the location score from every single Airbnb and Vrbo property from their reviews. And then we've essentially visualized that. So crowdsourcing every single guest review. Do they like that location or do they not? And then you dig into a market, you dig into a neighborhood, and it's like, okay, do guests like staying there or do they not? And that's such like a interesting way to think about the data and start visualizing your city. Like, all right, where do people really like being and where they don't?
And correct me if I'm wrong, you typically want to host a property. You want to be a host where people want to stay, right?
Yeah, and in the places that people want to stay, they're willing to pay more to be there. So, and it's going to work back to revenue.
Awesome. Well, yeah, kudos to the team. It looks great. It's powerful, and most importantly, it's effective for helping maximize investment returns. So go check it out.
Yeah. So, back to your question. Sorry for that detour there. I got really excited when I saw the January numbers. And there's, I think, some really good things to sort of take away there. So, for longtime listeners, you'll know, and I like to look at both nights booked and demand nights. Demand nights is sort of a lagging indicator. That's how many nights were stayed in that month compared to the prior month. And in January, demand was up 2.5%. Supply was up 4%. That means occupancy declined by 1.5%. Like another month of falling occupancy. I think that's 8 or 9 out of the past 10 months have been falling occupancy. Not great. But what got me excited was nights booked was up 5.5%. And that's one of the strongest rate of growth that we've seen in really 7 or 8 months. And when you dig under sort of the surface to sort of location types and markets, we're seeing two different types of trends emerge, or three. One is really strong demand for coastal and beach markets. So we are in the booking season now for spring break and getting into summer booking travel. And this is like make or break time for a lot of property managers. And I'm seeing really positive trends in terms of booking activity for those markets. And anecdotally, and chatting with a few property managers, they're seeing it as well. That things feel really good for beginning of the year booking. So booking season started January 1st, and we're absolutely seeing that trend up. The other sort of positive trend in bookings is in urban markets. So this is not one of the location types we have talked about positively over the past 6 years. Now, I'll say this is a little bit of a false positive because we are seeing incremental demand, really strong demand for the World Cup. So we'll talk about World Cup later, but I wouldn't get too excited about this one. But it is positive booking momentum for urban, our largest cities. And then the one sort of negative I see in the data, and it's definitely there, is in the mountain lake markets, where we see demand only up 2.5%. We saw occupancy down pretty significantly in these mountain markets. Occupancy was down almost 4%. Demand in the month of January was flat versus the prior year. And that's really a lot to do with the weak snow season that we've had in the Western markets, Colorado markets, a lot of the Utah markets, even up to Idaho, Tahoe. Like it's just been a really tough snow season, and it's showing up in the numbers.
Well, I will say it's awesome to hear bullish version of Jamie. I think that's a good signal for 2026. And it's important because I found this interesting that January, typically you think is like, slow month, people starting the new year, actually counts for about 10% of total annual bookings in aggregate overall. So it's a good predictor for the rest of the year, which is maybe where some of your bullish and excitement is coming from. On the bookings and demand growth year over year, Jamie, are you seeing that consistent in all property types? So true for luxury and for economy, for budget. What is the variability there?
Yeah, and we're still seeing the K-shaped economy play out, of and performance being better for luxury properties, weaker for economy and budget ones. I will say on the ski market ones, and why I think a lot of people might be surprised when they're like, Jamie, you said and nights booked were up, I think it was like 2.5% in mountain markets, and like that's bad. It's like there is essentially two major mountain ranges in the U.S. So today's geography lesson: the Colorado Rockies, snow has been terrible. You go though to the East Coast and look at the Appalachians, snow has been excellent, and we see booking activity that has been very strong. So the East Coast ski areas, while maybe not as nice, as large, as high as the Rockies, have had significantly better snow this winter, and it showed up in terms of if you're looking to book on a last minute ski vacation, like it might be or it has been a good year for people to just choose maybe going to New Hampshire or Vermont instead of Colorado or Utah.
Very helpful. Okay, so let's also set the economic backdrop in terms of what are the conditions on the field right now as we look at January, maybe even the prior few months and the next couple months, helping to inform some of the data we are seeing play out so far.
Yeah. So a few different and sort of narratives here. One is we got the January Dobbs number, and they were excellent. 130,000 jobs added, the largest monthly gain since December 2024, and that's great. Uh, the problem, though, is we also got the revisions for 2025, and we saw the revisions wipe out a lot of the job growth for the year. Like the 130,000 jobs in January was just 50,000 short of the total jobs added in all of 2025. And almost all of that job growth was in just the healthcare category. So overall, it was a really weak year for job growth in 2025. Why I care so much about job growth is job growth equals growth for lodging. And if we aren't growing jobs, then we're not growing the number of people that are traveling. So that's both a good and bad thing. I do expect the probably 130,000 jobs number is going to get revised down, but it does tell me I'm more than likely job growth is positive. We saw unemployment edge down from 4.4 to 4.3. The unemployment rates don't get revised, so that one's steady, and it tells me that, and we've maybe where we were trending up in terms of unemployment in the back half of 2025, we've at least plateaued or even maybe coming back down. So I'm feeling really good about some of the recent economic figures. Inflation, and we definitely saw a pop after the tariff announcements, and those started to flow through. But we are going to start getting in past some of that those increases in the back half of 2025. So broadly for 2026, I do think we're going to see the inflation numbers continue to look good, and interest rates more than likely going to come down. And then now that we're through January, and January was our first month where we started to see some of the changes around the big beautiful bill and tax policy. So no longer are restaurant employees getting taxed on their tips. Like while that was passed in 2025, it didn't actually start showing up in people's paychecks until this year. And then we're going to get, and very quickly, and it's really already starting into tax refund season. And the expectation is much larger refunds for people because of the tax policy changes. And if you've got that money in your pocket, might as well book a vacation.
I think that's the perfect summary of why the economic data matters and why we spend time on it. Truly, you can look at all of these fancy metrics and reports and varied economics, textbooks or literature, or whatever it is. What you just said makes sense for us in our industry. If there are jobs and dollars in people's pockets, people like to travel, they have money to spend, they'll stay at your short-term rental.
Yep. And that's where the two major metrics that I focus on every month is jobs growth and income growth, and of which we're looking at disposable income, so post-tax dollars to spend. And we're continually seeing now incomes rising faster than inflation, which means people have more disposable income to spend on travel. So that hasn't been always the case the past 3 years. So this is a positive trend looking out as we look at 2026.
Well, speaking of data points rising, let's come back to the short-term rental industry. Listings growth continues to re-accelerate after a slowdown in the middle of last year. So in January, we saw available listings rise about 4% year over year, with a renewed growth in new listings. So where are we seeing this? Is it bifurcated to different markets? Is there a particular leader from a market type or property type?
Yeah, and this is the one where it looks to be a positive signal for investor growth, but I'm going to give sort of my caveat here of there can be a lot of noise in this data. And I'm not yet convinced we're seeing this trend yet of listing growth. So you look at our chart on new listings, it's essentially like the past year and a half, 2 years, we've been bouncing around in 50 to 60,000 or 50 to 55,000 new listings. We're slightly higher than 50,000, but it's the same number we were seeing last summer. So I'm not yet ready to, and even though that was my big prediction for 2026, that we were going to see supply growth reaccelerate, it would not surprise me at all if we saw 3.5% or 3% next month. That this is going to have some volatility to it. We always see some volatility around it. So I would say let's not call it a trend yet, but it is something, and it is a data point that we're seeing that supply is trending up a bit.
What would be the leading indicators of this, Jamie? Are you looking at new home starts, home sales? What can give you
Yeah, I'm
context here?
looking at home sales. In January was a new seasonally adjusted low for home sales. So I am just not seeing the housing market turn in a way that would make me convinced that we're going to see a meaningful reacceleration in short-term rental supply growth.
Very helpful. Okay. What did we see from the occupancy side? You mentioned it at the headline, but any key trends to pull out or particular data points around occupancy being down about 1.5 points year over year?
Yeah, and fortunately for most markets, like most operators aren't worried about their January occupancy, right? Unless you're in a ski market, and this is and December, January are your key months, and essentially those have been a wash. And most people aren't too worried. It's like, okay, if I get booked, I get booked. If I don't, I don't. I know my property in North Georgia, January, February, the weakest 2 months. I think a lot of investor markets on in Gatlinburg, the Florida markets, or at least beach markets there, like there's not a ton of demand. So yeah, it was weak, but I don't think it's a indication that and we're going to continue that weakness. And yeah, a lot of the markets that we've seen weakness in, and it's clearly, and it's understood why. Like it's either snow or it's some other reason that isn't necessarily an indicator of overall weakness.
And now, as we maybe turn our direction forward, as we look at forward pacing, right now it seems like a strong spring and summer from a demand standpoint. However, I think you may know to this, and we can dig in here in just a moment, could be a red herring because of World Cup data. But what are we seeing overall? Maybe if you are able to extract that, or just at the macro level, and then let's dig into World Cup.
Yeah. So in general, we're seeing strong bookings, both in the World Cup markets and outside of the World Cup markets. And I think this is going to be a broader trend that we're going to have to dig into with so much demand now on the books for people sort of planning their World Cup travel. that is now extending out into those markets that people are combining with their trips. So you've been to Kansas City before, right?
I have not.
You have
Even
not
as
been to.
as a Midwest native, I've never been to Kansas City. I'm embarrassed to admit.
Okay. I've been to Kansas City for the Verma Executive Summit, or not Verma Executive, Verma Springs Fling, or one of the Verma events.
One of those things.
Yeah. And well, Kansas City's awesome. If I was booking a trip to the US to go see a game in Kansas City isn't going to be the only city I visit when I'm on that trip, right? So when we look at pacing this summer, June and July for markets outside of our World Cup cities, we are also seeing significant demand growth in both a lot of the urban markets. So maybe, and you're going to Houston for the games for the World Cup, but you've never been to Austin. Like, let's add a trip to Austin because that's an awesome city to visit. Like, they don't have World Cup, but they're going to see significant spillover demand with games in both Dallas and Houston. So I think we're already starting to see, and I think that's why the US in general is pacing so high. It's not just the demand for World Cup, but it's also all the excess demand or other trips that people are going to be making when they come to the US.
The spillover effect.
Yeah. A lot of positive externalities, to use an economics term.
Classic. There you go. Word of the day. Well, you are in a World Cup city of Atlanta.
Yep.
Do you have a sense for how much you can make hosting in Atlanta, Jamie?
I love that question, Scott. It's almost like you're leading the witness. Yeah, so we did create a World Cup calculator. So this is for anyone that's used AirDNA's Rentalizer tool, similar vein. You put in an address, and our Rentalizer estimate estimates the annual earnings for any listing around the world. Our World Cup calculator is actually going to estimate your earnings in one of these cities during the length of the World Cup. So from the start to the end of the event. And it's really meant to be not for the investor, but for the average person that's living in that city that might want to take advantage of the earnings that you could make by listing your home. And I've shared it with some friends in the Atlanta area. They were pretty surprised in terms of how much they could earn. I might have convinced one or two of them to actually take a trip during the World Cup and rent out their home while they're away. Though I'd say the only ones that are even partially convinced are the ones that don't have kids. That the time and effort to do that doesn't seem daunting. And then another funny story is I posted in my neighborhood Facebook group, and man, the hatred, the comments, like I should know better than to post anything related to short-term rentals in a neighborhood group.
Never a contentious topic. Never a contentious
so
topic.
contentious.
It is. I mean, you're right. Kids can be a obstacle to getting your home prepared to rent. However, what's really cool is if you go and enter your address, and if you're in one of those cities, the numbers can be compelling enough to pack the kids up and go on a cruise or go on a trip to visit the in-laws, whatever it may be. Because for some people, this is like covering a mortgage payment, 2 mortgage payments, maybe 3 mortgage payments, enough to finish the bathroom remodel, whatever it may be. So this is a really fun tool we built, the AirDNA World Cup calculator. You can see it at AirDNA/World Cup online. Go ahead and plug in the address. And if I'm guessing a lot of our listeners, Jamie, are already interested or hosts, that's okay. Because if you refer, Airbnb actually just announced a pretty slick and compelling incentive if you refer a host in a World Cup city. So if you know somebody and you refer them, you can get paid for referring them.
Yeah. So you say that, and my new plan is I'm going to post again in the neighborhoods around me the same World Cup calculator, try to get the same engagement, but also include my host referral link So maybe I get some. I think in some markets, like $750, like for every host you refer, like it is not insignificant money that you could earn from referring in some of these World Cup cities.
You always have an edge. Well, I think let's in subsequent episodes and reviews, we'll be able to dissect the World Cup data in greater depth, which will be fun. But Jamie, this has been a fun recap of January. It sounds like we have a great year ahead.
No, I agree. It's it's a strong start to the year. January is always my litmus test for the year ahead, though with the caution, and I know how you love my cautions. Things started out really good in January last year, and then and things changed. So things can always change. Things always do change, either for better or worse. So that's why you got to stay on top of the data. You got to keep paying attention to how bookings are playing out. And yeah, don't put it on autopilot.
Perfect. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Scott. See you later.